There are moments in television that aren't scripted, they simply happen. And in that split second, something bigger than entertainment takes over. One evening on The Tonight Show, Johnny Carson, the man who made millions laugh, found himself silent, because in his hands wasn't another cue card or joke setup. It was a letter from a war veteran that changed the tone of the entire room. Johnny had been behind that famous wooden desk for nearly 2 decades. Audiences knew his rhythm, the raised eyebrow after a punchline, the pause before a witty remark, the glint of amusement in his eye. That night, the monologue flowed as usual, light political humor, a few jokes about California weather, and the kind of laughter that rolled through the studio like a familiar melody. But 7 minutes into the show, something shifted. Out of the corner of his eye, Johnny saw one of his stage managers stepping into frame. Something that never happened unless it was truly urgent. The laughter died mid-echo. The stagehand held a plain white envelope, the kind you'd expect to see in a stack of fan mail. Except this one had the words, "To Mr. Carson, please read immediately," scrawled across it in shaky handwriting. Johnny looked puzzled but calm. He nodded slightly, accepted the envelope, and the cameras caught that subtle change, the tightening of his jaw, the focus in his eyes. The band quieted. Even Ed McMahon leaned forward, unsure what was about to unfold. He turned to the audience, holding the envelope carefully, almost reverently. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said softly, "we've just received something unusual. Would you mind if I take a moment to read it?" The crowd murmured approval, their curiosity piqued. Johnny opened the envelope slowly, as if afraid to disturb whatever emotion was trapped inside. Inside was a folded letter written in faded blue ink. The first few words made his hands tremble slightly. "Dear Mr. Carson," it began. As Johnny read silently to himself, his usual half-smile faded. The pages told a story that wasn't meant to entertain. It was meant to reach him. The letter came from a retired U.S. Army sergeant named William Bill Hanley, a Vietnam veteran who had served 3 tours overseas and was now confined to a hospital bed in California. Bill's words weren't fancy. They were raw, simple, honest. He thanked Carson for the laughter that had helped him through nights when pain kept him awake. "There were days I thought the world forgot about us," he wrote. "But at 11:30 every night, you reminded me that joy still existed." Johnny's throat tightened. He cleared it gently, took a breath, and began to read the letter aloud. "Mr. Carson, my name is Bill Hanley. I served with the 5th Infantry Division from 1968 to 1972. I'm writing this from a VA hospital in Long Beach. I don't have much time left. The doctors say the cancer that started in my lungs has made its way through most of me now. But before I go, I wanted to tell you something that's been on my heart for years." The studio grew eerily quiet. The Tonight Show, known for its laughs, had fallen into a hush so still you could hear the faint hum of the stage lights. Bill went on to explain that during his first year in Vietnam, he'd lost his best friend in an ambush. For weeks afterward, he couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't even speak to his family. Then one night, his unit's rec room got a new television set, and The Tonight Show flickered onto the screen for the first time. "That night, you told a joke so dumb," Bill wrote, "that my entire squad burst out laughing. I can't even remember the punchline now, but that moment, that sound of laughter, it felt like life again." Johnny paused. His voice wavered. The audience could see the emotion hitting him in waves, but he pressed on. "Since coming home, I've watched your show. Every night. It's become part of my routine. My medicine, you might say. But I'm writing this because I've realized there's one thing I've never done. Say, thank you. You helped me remember what happiness sounded like." He stopped there for a moment, eyes glistening. Ed McMahon reached over and put a comforting hand on Johnny's shoulder. Then Johnny continued reading. I also have a small request. When I go, my daughter plans to read something at my service. She's shy, and I told her I'd ask you for help. I know you're busy, but if you could say something funny about soldiers on your show, anything at all, it would make her smile on the day she says goodbye. Her name is Laura. Johnny lowered the paper. His lips trembled. He looked straight into the camera and said, Bill, if you're watching tonight, I want you to know something. We're the ones who owe you our thanks. The audience erupted into applause, but not the usual roaring, laughter. It was slow, respectful, filled with emotion. After the commercial break, Johnny came back, still holding the letter. He said quietly, Folks, we talk a lot about entertainment, but sometimes life walks right through that curtain and reminds us what really matters. He then turned to his band leader, Doc Severinsen, and asked for something soft. The band began to play a mellow jazz tune as Carson reached for the phone on his desk. Can we get a call through to Long Beach, VA? He asked the control room. Within moments, they had a line open. Bill? Johnny said, his voice tender. This is Johnny Carson. Can you hear me? There was static for a second, and then a weak but warm voice came through. Is this really you, Mr. Carson? It's me, Johnny said, smiling faintly, and I just wanted to thank you for your letter. I think I speak for everyone here tonight. You've already given us more than we could ever give you. The veteran chuckled, softly. You made a lot of lonely nights easier, Johnny. Johnny's voice broke again. And you made a lot of hearts humble tonight, Bill. They spoke for a few more minutes, just two men, one famous, one forgotten, connecting through a phone line that felt sacred. Then Carson said something spontaneous. You said your daughter's name is Laura, right? Well, I'd like to invite you both to come visit us here at The Tonight Show. We'll make sure she gets to sit right in the front row. The audience applauded again, this time louder, fuller. The next week, Laura and her father did come to the show. Bill was frail but smiling. Johnny welcomed them personally, and during the taping, he told a light-hearted story about a soldier trying to salute while holding a hamburger, the same kind of silly humor Bill had written about. The crowd roared with laughter, and Bill laughed too, his eyes bright and wet with joy. 2 months later, Johnny received another letter, this one from Laura. It was brief, handwritten in blue pen, just like her father's. Mr. Carson, Dad passed away peacefully last week. He talked about that night on your show until the very end. He said he never imagined the man who made America laugh would take the time to read his words. Thank you for making him feel seen. Johnny folded the note and placed it inside the drawer of his desk on set. For years afterward, crew members said that drawer was always locked, and that letter never left it. Years later, in an interview, Carson was asked about the moments that had changed him the most. He didn't mention the celebrities, the jokes, or even his final episode. He mentioned Bill Hanley's letter. That night, he said, I learned that laughter isn't just about jokes, it's about connection. And sometimes the smallest voices say the biggest things. The ripple effect of that one moment continued long after. Within weeks of the broadcast, The Tonight Show, a studio received hundreds of letters from veterans and their families. Some shared their own stories of watching Carson during lonely hospital stays or deployments overseas. Others simply said, "Thank you," to both men. Producers began collecting those letters, eventually turning them into a charity segment called Laughs for the Troops, which raised money for veterans' hospitals across the country. Carson quietly donated much of his own salary to fund the initiative, but refused to let NBC publicize it. "It's not a story about me," he told them. "It's about them." Sometimes the quietest thank you can echo louder than applause. A decade later, Laura Hanley appeared on The Tonight Show as an adult guest. She was now a nurse, working with veterans. When Johnny saw her walk onto the stage, he stood up immediately and embraced her. The audience, unaware of their shared history, watched in awe as emotion filled the air. Laura said softly, "My dad used to say you gave him one last mission to keep people smiling." Johnny smiled back, his voice barely above a whisper, and he completed it. The crowd rose to their feet, clapping in reverence for a man they'd never met, but somehow knew a soldier who'd reminded everyone that even in silence, gratitude speaks volumes. That night became one of the most replayed and requested moments in The Tonight Show's archives. Not because of the tears, but because of the truth behind them. It wasn't about fame or television, it was about human decency. About one man recognizing another's courage in the simplest way possible, by listening. When laughter meets gratitude, something sacred happens. And though the show continued, and the years rolled on, Johnny Carson never forgot that letter. It remained in his study long after his retirement, framed beside his Emmy Awards. A quiet reminder that beyond the lights and laughter, real life waits to be honored. When Johnny passed away in 2005, his family donated several of his keepsakes to the Smithsonian. Among the cufflinks and cue cards was a small, weathered envelope, the same one that had stopped a television legend mid-sentence decades earlier. Inside was the letter that once brought an entire nation to tears. Visitors who see it today often pause longer than they expect to. They lean in close, reading the faded handwriting, and for a moment they feel what that studio felt. The silence, the sincerity, the collective heartbeat of millions, witnessing compassion unfold live on air. Because sometimes the greatest show isn't the one scripted to make you laugh, it's the one that reminds you how to feel.